businesses and entrepreneurs to understand is, yeah, it's about being in a business and being able to lead people, but it's about sales, it's about customer service, it's about delegation, it's about networking. All of these things are people driven. If you learn how to really do that properly, you can be far more effective and influential without being manipulated.
Good morning, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited because we are having a special guest today, and that is author and speaker Tony Chapman. Now, Tony is a recognized thought leader, and particularly what he talks about is the areas of workplace relationships. And it's interesting because Tony has devoted his entire life to understanding what makes people tick, how to bring out the best in people, including ourselves, and how to pass this information on in terms of simple yet practical terms. And what he does is really address our hidden biases, helping us navigate disruptions and change, and also provides leaders with skills that helps make them indispensable. Now, Tony provides practical solutions that really aligns people's real world experiences. Now, Tony has worked with a variety of really large corporations as well as government agencies. Some of his clients include the U.S. Secret Service. Oh my goodness, Tony, that's a big one. The Department of Homeland Security, Chase Bank, Estee Lauder, and NASA. And he helps people reach new heights of effectiveness by understanding themselves and others better. Tony has a book out, and we're going to talk about that today. It's called The Force Multiplier. I love this book, and it's how to lead teams where everyone wins, everyone. And also, he was a 2018 TEDx, and his talk was how to stop settling for less. So please join me in welcoming Tony Chapman to the platform. Hey, Tony, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing
Like
wonderful.
be like, hey.
I am so excited about this book, and it's become one of my all-time favorites, guys. And it's called The Force Multiplier and How to Lead Teams Where Everyone Wins. And I love this book because it takes a very unique approach to leadership, right? And in particularly that entry-level supervisor, that mid-tier manager that really isn't in control of your focus and your vision, and really how that entrepreneurs is really the make it or break it point of your company and making sure that you have the right person in place. And so today, Tony and I are going to talk about this concept, Force Multiplier. Tony, welcome to our platform.
Thank you so much.
Tony, can you tell us a little bit about Force Multiplier? Like, what is it and how do we use that?
Okay, so let's start with a story. There was a situation between myself and a close friend. And this is not just any old friend. I mean, our lives are intertwined. Our wives are close. Our children are close. So you can imagine just how devastated I was when I found out that he was being once again deployed to Afghanistan. So we did this get together at my house, and it was kind of we love you. We're going to be there for you. We ate, we drank, we laughed. But there was a point where we went around the room and started sharing, and we were talking about how we'll stay in contact with you, how we'll make sure your family, and especially with your young child, they're going to be taken care of. But there was one person I was really waiting to hear from. He's a high-ranking officer in the U.S. Army, and I knew he would say something unique because he'd been to many of what he called these deployment parties before, but I wasn't ready for what he said because he started off with, so you're what we call a force multiplier because by your very presence, you bring out the best in everyone around you. And I don't remember what he said after that. I just I was like in a blur because number one, I hadn't heard that term before. And it's a force multiplier is really a term that's primarily used for tools, right? It's you put a certain amount of energy in and you get a lot more out. That's why on the cover of books is a lever, right? You push down a little bit, you can lift something big, or a hammer. It's a force multiplier. But people, and then my mind just started to crank because, I teach leaders how to be effective leaders. And people try to define leadership by, leaders make other leaders, leaders affect culture. But no one just says, because you're there, everyone else is better. But shouldn't that be given? Isn't that the reason that we have leaders there? And so it was just this mind-blowing. It wasn't as much that it was a new concept. it put a language and a framework behind something I've been thinking about. And so that's really been, in many ways, my mission. It's to take people who are in leadership positions, whether it's corporate America, entrepreneurs, uh, you know, community, philanthropy, whatever, and to make them, to give them the tools to make other people better. But then I also believe that organizations can be force multipliers so that not just some people are effective and some people are engaged, but everyone is. And so it was a really big paradigm shift for me.
That is an amazing concept. The thought that because a leader is there, that everyone is better. I have heard terrible terms about, especially that mid-tier manager, the micromanager, the babysitter, the the
Yep.
one that the pranker, you know what I mean? But to actually say that a leader is effective because they make everyone around them better, that is a significant concept. And I love your book because in your book, you talk about the study that was done by Gallup, right? And Gallup studies human resources, and they talk about employee engagement. And one of the things that you say in your book is that at any given time, 2/3 of the workforce at any company, it doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, is disengaged. They're like literally they're getting paychecks and they're not even there. I mean, I love the comment you said they're absent but present, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And tell me about this force multiplier and how that makes a difference on that concept of 2/3 of your workforce is not even there.
Well, so, at the time the book was written, we were hitting all-time highs in engagement, right? We were hitting 34, 35% engagement, and people were celebrating like, wow, we've hit an all-time high. This is the biggest number since we started measuring. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, if 34% is engaged, then 2/3 isn't. And we've just come to accept it as normal, right? We wouldn't do that if you went to your doctor said, you're doing well. The only problem is that your heart is working at about 1/3 capacity. You wouldn't go, oh, glad it's nothing important. Of course not. You go, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this, right? And so now the idea is with the force multiplier, the reality is most people naturally are able to lead a certain type of person. Normally it's a person who's a lot like them. But then the rest of the people they struggle with, and the really bad thing is when they struggle with them, instead of saying, you know what, this means I need to learn more about being a better leader, they say, well, it must be them. Because see, this 1/3 is really responding to my awesome leadership techniques. So what's wrong with this other 2/3 of people? And it's just that your technique's not working on them. So you need to expand your repertoire. And that was really the thing. Because the part that I don't talk about with that, and maybe I do in the book, but the number one driver of engagement is a person's relationship with their direct supervisor. So the reason they're not engaged, okay, check this out. This is between me and you, because just me and you talking, right? Here's what people don't know. The original title of the book was Why I Hate My Job.
What?
Yes. The original title of the book was going to be Why I Hate My Job. And I had it all figured out. The cover was Why I Hate My Job. And then it was like a multiple choice question. And the right answer was my boss. Because that's the issue. People actually, in general, like what they do. They want to contribute. They like going to work. They sometimes like their coworkers, even the ones who are, challenging. But often it's who they work for that disengages them. And so if we can figure out how to reconnect and be what people need, then that can turn around. It could turn around a person's career path. It can turn around our workforce. It can, reduce turnover. All of those other things can happen. And obviously, productivity and profitability go right along with that. But it really is this ability or this idea that most people want to do a good job. So stop getting in their way.
I love that. That's so many juicy bits and morsels that are in that. There's a saying, and you quote it in your book too, that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses, right?
Mhm.
They leave people, right? And they're leaving because of the supervisor, that has really, abused them or not treated them equally as they treat everyone else. And so they're leaving that person, not necessarily the company or the opportunity. And so that is a really, really great point with that. And, and it's expensive too. There's a saying that, to replace an employee, you pretty much have to spend that person's entire wage to replace that
Right.
person. But it's even worse to have them sitting on your payroll, right? Where they're disengaged and literally just coming to work every day, but not producing.
Yeah. And then they leave your company and go somewhere else and do a good job, And then it's like, I wasted money, I had to spend money to replace them. And it turns out they really weren't the problem. I just needed to figure it out better. So, yeah. And, and the funny thing about that is often, so I was having a conversation with an HR manager. And I remember we were at lunch and she said, the problem is we can't find any good people. And I was like, okay, come on. We know the number one driver of engagement is the direct supervisor. But what happens is we start ignoring the obvious and looking for other reasons. Maybe we're not good at hiring. Maybe we're not screening people. Maybe it's, this young generation, all of these things, instead of, especially now, when we have a more diverse workforce, when we're in a pandemic, when we're in an economic possible recession, or at least, not an ideal situation, all of these things magnify the weakness of leadership. And so the answer is to become better leaders. If we do that, a lot of the other things we'll find out will fix themselves.
I love that, becoming better leaders. And this is an interesting topic because, I love in your book how you talk about the reason why you wrote this book was because there was a gap. Everybody, when they talked about leader, were teaching people how to create mission statements and be visionary and set pace, but the problem wasn't in the mission or the vision. It was in the execution. It was in that supervisor level and that mid-management level. That's where the problem was. And part of the problem was people are not taught to be supervisors, right? They're promoted because they were really great at their job, right? They got things done. They clicked apparently with someone else that brought them along in their career. And so, Tony, the question becomes, how do you become a great really day-to-day leader? Because that's really, like you said, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the force multiplier really is. It's that person that interacts with that person that's actually doing the job, right? That's doing the fulfillment. So how do you become a better leader?
Well, I think there's a few ways to look at it, right? There are some basic principles that you can go through and they'll make you a better leader. Things like, one seems obvious, treat everyone with dignity and respect. But the reality is we don't do that. We have favorites and we have people that we naturally don't get along with, and we don't realize how much we have to do that. We can do things like making sure our attitude is always positive because, for example, one study showed that you could predict the effectiveness of a sales team by their emotional state, literally by their happiness. And so, understanding that as a leader, your emotional state affects others. Things like learning how to actually delegate, because most people don't know how to. They tell people how to do things, and yet they don't understand, there's a science and an art to it. And so understanding how to do it. So there's that aspect of it. But then, as you know from having read the book, a large part of it is understanding how to connect with people and how to connect with people who are different than you, to understand, the basics of personalities. And, there are a lot of different personality tests. I actually created one for the book. And it's not as much which test is better, it's how you use it. And it's understanding that we naturally use our personality and our responses as the benchmark and expect other people to do the same. But once we learn, well, no, they have different needs, different things that motivate them, different things that excite them, different things that tick them off. And if we can translate what we're doing in a way that they'll receive better, then we are far more effective. And here to me is the key, because I know a lot of your audience is actually entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and small businesses. And they may be thinking, okay, this is all great, but I don't have a huge staff, right? I don't have all this. The three things about being a force multiplier. Number one, it teaches you how to lead people better. Now, the truth is, even as an entrepreneur, at some point, you're going to need to start offloading things. You're going to need an assistant. You're going to need vendors to do things. And if you don't know how to lead them, if you're like most entrepreneurs who came in with, I've got a great idea or a great skill or a great talent, but haven't learned the leadership aspect of it, it'll hurt you. The second thing is being a good force multiplier will teach you how to influence other people. And that's where the game starts to change, because now it's not just about people that you've hired. It's about people that you're networking with, people that you're selling to, right? And so the fact that now you can influence their decisions and help them to realize that, what you have to offer is a benefit to them. And you can do that in a way that doesn't anymore feel like selling, but it feels far more like providing. That's big. And then third, being a force multiplier teaches you how to connect with people. It sounds like the same thing, but it's not. Because, for example, many people in my industry really got hurt during this pandemic, right? I mean, we're professional speakers, we're on planes, we're traveling, and all that shut down. But because I have relationships, and my clients don't view me as a vendor, they view me as a partner, some view me as a friend. For me to continue to reach out to them never felt like sales. It felt like the continuation of a relationship. And for me to ask them, so what can I just do to help? I mean, what do you need? It's not about money. All of a sudden, my business exploded because it was a connection-driven thing. And that's from being a force multiplier. And so that is what I really want businesses and entrepreneurs to understand is, yeah, it's about being in a business and being able to lead people, but it's about sales. It's about customer service. It's about delegation. It's about networking. All of these things are people driven. If you learn how to really do that properly, you can be far more effective and influential without being manipulative.
I love that. So really recognizing that it's about connection, right? It's about being able to speak to people on their language. It's not their job to understand your language. It's your job to understand their language so that you can motivate them, so that you can communicate what they need, even if it's not in your team. It's for your customers, being able to understand their language so that you can speak their language to help them make decisions to be able to move their businesses forward. If it's a sales relationship or an employee, being able to motivate what they need in order to be successful.
Right, absolutely. And really that's what it's often about. I mean, we sell products, we have processes, but it's the people side that either gives us a competitive advantage or becomes our Achilles heel. And so really understanding that ability to connect makes a world of difference.
I love that. A lot of our listeners, they're in that scaling phase. So they're no longer a party of one. They're a minimum of a 500,000. They go up to 50 million in terms of revenue. And, one of the things that they fall into the trap of, new level, next level. And they're not able, if they're high six figures, they're not able to cross into seven figures because they don't know how to manage a team, or there's a constant attrition or turnover that happens. So when they get a new client, they lose a client because they can't get their team on board, or then just not even be able to master sales in some cases too. And you're right. That missing key is that people connection, and realizing that your way isn't always the normal way, right? Everybody has a different normal. That normal is literally relative to who you are.
Yeah, it's funny because we often talk about hiring teams of different skill sets so that our strengths cover other people's weaknesses, right? But it's almost like marriage, okay? Right? You're married, correct? Yeah, okay. So it's like
Yeah.
marriage, right? You're dating and you date a bunch of people who are just like you, and it's a lot of fun. But it's in the back of your mind, you're like, I can't marry somebody just like me. That will never work, right? So all of a sudden, you find someone and they're different. Their strengths cover your weaknesses. They're the opposites, and you see that quote unquote synergy. And so all of a sudden, you marry them, and then you spend the next few years trying to get them to be just like you. You know what I mean? That's the problem, right? Well, we do the same thing with teams. We hire people who say, okay, you know what? I need someone who's more data focused, detail oriented, so they can manage these processes. But then I need somebody over here who is far more of a creative, so they can do marketing. And I need this person who's far more of a people person because they're in sales. And then we get together and we get mad at them for being exactly who we hired them to be, instead of learning how to really pull them together with all those strengths. And that's the hardest part about being an entrepreneur. One of my good friends He has this great saying, LITE, leave it to the experts. So when you're in doubt, like there are certain things you're good at, but there are a lot of things that other people are experts at. So you leave it to the experts and you get out of the way and let them be experts.
I love that, letting the people that you hire do the job that they were hired for. And
Yeah,
I could see that, definitely like just even the feedback circle, right? Like, oh, you need to do this because it's more like how I would do it, right? That's
right.
exactly what you would see. Tony, this was amazing morsels of information. This was amazing. Very, very great scaling information to really get one out of the rut, to get into the next level, to be able to utilize and maximize their team, right? On being able to do this. And now, one of the questions that I love to ask our guests is if you could leave our listeners and our viewers with one piece of advice, and it can be personal, it can be business, but life changing, what would that piece of advice be?
Can I do a business and a personal? Is
Sure.
that okay? Okay,
Yeah.
business. Business is a contact sport. And so it's really, you're going to be made or broken by your contacts, by your relationships. So even though we've often gone to school for products and processes and we learned all these technical skills, business is a contact sport. And then personally, you always think of Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. Got to be happy and live life. Because here's the thing, being an entrepreneur, like I'm in the middle of like massive scale, right? Like I am in, I'll make more money in the next 2.5 months than I made in the last year and a half. Okay. It's just like we're in this like massive growth phase. And in the middle of it, I'm like, don't wear yourself out. Don't kill yourself. Don't die early chasing this money. In the back of my mind, I'm telling myself that. I think too many people don't tell entrepreneurs you still have to have boundaries. You still have to love your spouse, love your partner, love your kids, love your pets, love yourself. You have to do that because what you don't want to do is give up everything so that you can be successful and then not be able to enjoy it.
I love it. You're absolutely right. It's, because, your business will bleed over to every aspect of your business if you allow it to, right? Just like profit first. If you don't take your profit first, then the business will always need a new employee, it'll always need a new computer, it'll always need a new truck, it'll always need something.
Right.
And life is the same way. So I love that. That's great advice.
Thank you.
Now, Tony, so that our viewers and listeners can contact you so they can work with you, learn more about the Force Multiplier, what is the best way to reach you?
So, the best way is funny. Oh, go to this, go to that. Okay, number one, my last name is Chapman, right? CHAT as in Tom, MAN. Go to my website, tonychapman.com. It's got links to all my social media. It has ways to contact me. You can see everything that I offer and actually, there's stuff I don't offer. We see most of it. I just think, in the days of Google, if you look up my name, you're going to find me. So website, tonychapman.com. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm always on Instagram. I'm always on Facebook. I'm sometimes on Twitter. So Tony Chapman and you got it.
Thank you, Tony. And I love your Friday show too, by the way.
Thank
That is really
you.
fun watching that. So definitely tonychapman.com. I will go ahead and put Tony's contact information in our show notes. Thank you, Tony, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks so much for having me. This was an absolute blast.
Thank you.